So, I was blessed to be born into a Christian family in the Shenandoah Valley. My mom and dad instilled in us a love for God, tolerance, caring for others, helping, volunteering, all this stuff. I can't remember a time as a child not being involved in our church. It was Pleasant Valley Church of the Brethren was the name of it. And some of my favorite childhood memories of church were, of course, going to Sunday school and VBS and the youth group, and even did children's choir. Won't do adult choir, but children's choir was good. And our Christmas pageant one year, it just stands out in my mind. It was outside. I swear I think they had set up bleachers because so many people came to see it. And we had one of my brother's high school friends was a trumpet player, and he was all of a sudden, he's up on the roof of the church blowing his trumpet with a spotlight on him, and it was just awesome. It just really felt like you were there kind of for the nativity. One of the other things was that my dad was a trustee for years. My mom was the church secretary for years. And this was back in the day when the bulletin was done by the mimeograph machine, and my brother and I got to do that and then sniff the copies. It was so good. Yeah, so church was it was a big part of the community. There was a United Methodist Church in town. Ours was out in the country. Town being Weir's Cave, a tiny little place in Virginia. But it was like so many people from the community. Our doctor came to our church, and just, you kind of got to know everybody in the community. Mom would always read a Bible story to us at night. We'd do our grace and our prayers before bed. And I really wish I knew what had happened to that book, because the pictures, I remember just loving the Garden of Eden picture with all the animals and stuff. But knowing my mom, she probably gave it to someone who couldn't afford it for their kids after we had gotten older. She probably passed it on to somebody else, because she was always having my brother and me go help others. There was one little boy who's must have had muscular dystrophy or something, I don't know, and kind of needed physical therapy that the family couldn't afford. And I remember Mom and I going over there, and Mom kind of holding down the poor little boy his mom doing that, while my mom would move, because his mom didn't want to be the one inflicting pain, which you understand. But anyway, so very good memories from being in Pleasant Valley. And let's see, was there anything else? Oh yeah, how did I forget this? Being baptized in the full immersion baptismal pool behind the altar, the curtain opens, and that was pretty cool too, and stuck with me. Got my Bible that day. Doesn't have my name on it anymore because I had to have it rebound. It was falling apart so badly. Let's see, oh yes, and feet washing on Maundy Thursday. That was something that Church of the Brethren did. Where we'd be in the fellowship hall, the tables would just be lined up, and you'd start at one end and just pass the pan, and you'd wash the next person's feet. And it's a very humbling thing when you're doing something that Jesus did to his disciples and you're doing it to somebody else in your church. It's just kind of, it brings the connection together. So those were probably some of the big things from church. Also, when I broke my little finger on a mission trip with our youth group when I was in middle school, we were getting firewood for some of the poor in the community who didn't have enough heat and would use their wood stoves or whatever. So the adults were out there, and us youth were being the belt. The conveyor belt to get the wood from the woods into the pickup truck. I was the last one by the pickup truck, and we were all tossing the little logs, and I was doing fine until I caught the log and kept swinging back, and pickup truck and my finger and the log all got mixed up together. Broke that. Of course, went to Dr. Kidwell, the guy from our church, and got it set and painkillers and all this, and went back later for a checkup, and it had developed an infection and gangrene. And he was like, let's give it a week. Let's see what's going to happen. He said, but you might lose it. They cut off the dead skin at the time, but he goes, you might lose it. I was like, I don't want to lose my little finger. It's been with me all my life. And anyway, so, well, a week, well, you're in middle school. And so a week later, we go back, and I remember distinctly him looking at it and go, well, he's been working, hasn't he? And we all agreed that, yes, he had, because that was a miracle. Now, when I got to high school, I made some new friends and good friends, and they went to a different church. And by then I could drive, and so I started going to their church, getting involved in their youth group and everything, and we had retreats and fun and fellowship, and it was still a wonderful time there. And when I was a junior in high school, not when I was a junior, I think I was maybe a freshman or sophomore, but a junior who I kind of knew, he was the son of my dad's friend, got killed in a car accident. And that was the first time that death to a young person had really been close to me. I mean, you hear it on the news and all that stuff, but it's not the same as when it's right there at home. And I didn't have a lack of faith or anything right then. It was just that realization that, wow, we really don't live forever, and you don't have to be old to die. So that was just kind of a wake-up call that, yeah, let's get our things in order. Now, when I went off to college, I kind of drifted away from church, but not God. I still kept in contact. I wouldn't say that I read the Bible every day, but prayer was still a part, and trying to follow was still a part. Went to chapel a few times, and felt his presence lots in college, probably because I think Laura was talking about, how you pray when you're getting ready for tests and stuff. But, but I can just remember that he would give me feelings of peace just when I'd ask for him, and whether I was really nervous about something, he would still give me that calm. And I got involved with a social sorority, but we did do our share of partying, but also did mission work, like for March of Dimes and kid charities and stuff. So I felt like that was a good thing. And also in college, I volunteered. I think it was for one of my psych or sociology classes that I had to do some off-campus volunteer work. And so I'd volunteered with Head Start for that semester for a few days a week. And that was really my first time working with kids. And I was like, well, that's all right. No, it wasn't that bad. But it wasn't until after graduation, when I was still like searching for a job and career and what I wanted to do. I had majored in psychology in college because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and just thought psychology is a good all-round thing to have. And yes, it turned out to be. But that summer after graduation, I must admit I made some bad choices that I wish I could change, like traveling across country with the guy I was dating for 3 weeks, and then finding out later that he was actually separated from his wife, and found out much later, and that apparently during the time we had been dating, he had gotten her pregnant. And I was like, well, and he was always whining at me. That's why we broke up. He was always whining at me that he didn't want me to leave him or anything, that he'd run his car into the bridge on the way home. And after about the third time of hearing that, again, with prayer and stuff, I'm not a mean person, but it's like, that isn't my decision. If I break up with you, that will still be your decision to run into the abutment of the bridge or whatever, that I can't take responsibility. So anyway, we had already committed to going to a New Year's Day party, and this is to prove God's timing is just amazing. We were going to go to a New Year's Day party, the bowl games, and everybody brings snacks and food and stuff. And so that was going to be our last date. He already knew that. I'm not really sure why he took me anyway, because he knew that this was it. But at that party, there was a guy there and asked if anybody wanted to play Pong. Y'all remember Pong? And so I said, sure. And found out this guy's name was Lee. And he found out my name, but we did not exchange phone numbers. And with my maiden name being Madison with 2 T's and an E, he could not find me in the phone book for anything. He wanted to, but he couldn't. And so he's like, oh, well. And then about a week and a half later, he went across the hall from his apartment to, obviously, his neighbors to ask for honest. He goes, honest, I swear, this is what happened. Asked for a cup of sugar because he was going to make a cake. And Meg was one of the mutual friends from the party, and my ex was in there basically crying on her shoulder about me, going, well, I guess I won't need this phone number anymore, holding up my phone number, which I don't know why he needed to have that if we'd been dating for 6 months. But anyway, holding up my phone number, and Lee looking over his shoulder going, 234-5849, 234-5849. And so this is, I mean, I really feel like God meant for us to be together, because that was just timing. If Lee hadn't gone right then, we probably, well, you know, God would have, if he really wanted us to be together, he could have found another way, but we feel like that was meant to be. And Victoria has told me that of all of her friends' parents, like meets and how they got together, that ours is the best. So let's see here, what else? Oh, and then, so a little over a year later, we got married. And another one of God's blessings is that if I didn't have my own family, I could be in Lee's family. I mean, the parents, the sisters, the brothers, I mean, they're like another family. It's those mother-in-law jokes and such, none of that ever comes to mind when it's with our families. And Lee felt the same way about my parents, too. He said my dad was more of a dad than his dad ever had been. So my dad was more of a dad to Lee than his dad had ever been. It was his stepdad who I knew. His stepdad was a good guy, but and I had met Lee's dad a couple of times, and I kind of understood where Lee came from, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, we got married, and then we moved to Leonardtown, Maryland, which is only about an hour and a half, 2 hours away here, and cute little town. And our apartment was just off the town square, and on the other side of the town square was St. Paul's United Methodist Church. And, you know, me, being the creature of convenience that I am, was like, well, let me try this church. And it was great. And I ended up running the youth group there for a couple of years. And we did some fun stuff. We had the lock-ins, the spaghetti dinners. We took field trip up to National Cathedral. All kinds of fun stuff. We did the living nativity out there on the town square too for the church, and we had we got donkeys and sheep and stuff. So that was fun stuff. And what was especially nice is that, you know, lots of times life goes good, but you're not necessarily aware that God's hand is in there. And so I made a point of saying I felt blessed again and was aware and thankful, because so many times we just la through life. But yes, I know that God is definitely there. And so we stayed there for about 4 years, moved up to the D.C. area over in Temple Hills. And because Lee got, as his mom said, oh, thank God you have a real job, because Lee was a DJ, just going from radio station to radio station, but then he landed a government job with Voice of America, and he was also happy about it, but his mom especially. And then I started working for the school-age child care program over here in Fairfax County. And after a year of driving over the Wilson Bridge every day, we moved.
Did not wear that T-shirt.
Yeah, we ended up buying a duplex up in Alexandria off of Huntington Avenue, and we were there for almost 10 years. And Oh, while we lived in Temple Hills, I tried a few local churches, but never found anything that fit. So I would say that that year I really wasn't a church attendee. But once we moved over to Alexandria, well, lo and behold, like a mile and a half away is Cameron United Methodist Church. And so again, Sally's right there. I think God might have put the creature of convenience in me for a reason. But anyway, so went there, and let's see. And I was involved in the Sunday school, in the UMW. One of the standout, when I was writing up the Faith Journey and we were trying to think of people who had mentored or just been an example to us, there was an older woman at Cameron in the UMW. Her name was Jane Nesselrode. She was legally blind. I mean, she could see, but she couldn't read and such like that. So she had memorized so many hymns. I mean, I'd be in church with her, and she'd just be singing along with everything because she already had it memorized. And we were doing a study of the book of Acts, I remember, and she couldn't, even with the large print Bibles and stuff, she couldn't. And I remember with when you work at SAC, you go in the morning for before school, and then you wait until the kindergartners come at noon. So you have this big break in between. And so I told her, well, I'll read Acts and record it. I said, won't tell you every verse, but each chapter I'll let you know that we're breaking it up. And so I did that during those breaks, and it was one of those things where that could have been considered a chore, but it wasn't. It was just like an act of love that I wanted to do for her. And that was another time that I just felt God going, Sally, you can do this for somebody. So that's what we did. And let's see here, trying to think of anything else big that was going on there. Oh, yes, and when I started with the SAC program, when we lived over in Maryland, I went all the way out to Braddock Road to Kings Glen SAC. And I continued with that once we had moved to Alexandria, but I started getting closer and closer centers. I was like, well, is there an opening here? And so finally I was working only about 2 miles from home, again, trying for that convenience factor, and taking public transportation to get there, because I've always been felt that it's very important that we are stewards of the earth, and we shouldn't just, if we can do something to help, do it. So being in Alexandria and all the buses and everything, I was like, well, I can just take this. And I remember one time I was walking up the street to get to the bus stop, and I had plenty of time, but then I'd forgotten my lunch. I looked at my watch. It's like, do I have time to go back? And a little voice in my head was like, yeah, go ahead, you've got time. So I went back, started walking back up the street again. Little voice in my head got real loud and said, but you don't have to walk, you can run. And and I ran, and as the bus got there just as I got there. So it was like God again watching out for the details in our lives. I mean, it's just, he's not just the God of everything, he is, but he's also the God of the little minute details. So that was something that that's always stuck with me. And Lee and I, at that time, we didn't want kids. We were very happy being the dinks, the double income, no kids. We could afford going on nice vacations, and we had the dog, and we were very happy as things were. And then one day I went grocery shopping, and I wasn't feeling right, and got real bad, and turned out I had a miscarriage without even realizing I was pregnant. Yeah. And, spent the afternoon in the hospital, and Lee with me and everything. And I came out of it okay, but I was like, well, how come I'm feeling so sad about losing a child that I didn't even, A, know I was carrying, and B, didn't think we wanted in the first place. And so that just kind of, we were taking precautions. We continued to take precautions, but I guess God wanted us to have Victoria, because I did get pregnant again, and had Victoria. Well, when I was pregnant, and living up there off of Huntington Avenue. Lee was always walking home from the metro station, and he was we were there for about 10 years, and he was a little concerned. It has now turned around, gentrified but back then it was kind of going downhill. There was getting to be graffiti around, guys walking in the middle of the streets wearing their little bandana colors, and Lee goes, I don't think we want to raise a child right here. Let's see if we can find another place. And so we started looking around for another place and came down here to Mason Neck. The house we bought was the second one we looked at. We were trying to talk, because we were saying, we've got to look some more. We cannot just fall in love with the second thing we see and do that. But we ended up doing that anyway. And so that first week after we moved in, I saw that, hey, Cranford's only a mile away. Being the creature of convenience that I am, I said, well, let me try this place. And so I remember as I was walking across the parking lot, and I think her last name was Lancaster, Linda Lancaster.
Linda Lancaster, yes, I know her.
She met me in the parking lot and was just so she was like every other Cranford member you meet. She was so welcoming. Come on in. Oh, are you expecting? Because I was already 5 months pregnant by then, and we sat in the pew together. She introduced me to other people, and it's been here ever since. And so that's when I wrote down about coming, because seriously, I could have driven straight up Telegraph Road and gotten to Cameron, the church I'd been going to for 10 years, and it would have only taken me maybe 25 minutes, half an hour. But that's not my nature. And so when I had put down here, I wrote down Cranford, not Cameron, and I all put in parentheses, maybe God made me this creature of convenience on purpose. Maybe this isn't, he made me however he wanted, but I know there are things that I can work on. This being a creature of convenience, I don't think that's such a bad thing in me. It's worked out really well in my life so far. I'll get to the... Oh, thanks. I'll get to the things that I need to work on in a little while, but we'll... And then when Victoria was born, I got... It's then that I found out a little glimpse of how God feels for us. Because I remember sitting in the nursery... I don't know, she must have been 2-3 weeks old, and I'm in the rocking chair and trying to get her to fall asleep, which she did. And then you just, look at your child all lovingly and everything. And your heart just swells. And I'm going, wow, I feel this way about you. And God feels this way, but probably a million times more because he's God, about us. And it just gave me this glimpse of how the all-encompassing love that is available for us from God, and how we can share it with others. And she got baptized here in the church by Bill McMahon, and who was great. Love Bill. And then started getting involved here in the church because wanted to be with Victoria, so started working in the nursery, and as she grew, went on to Sunday school, and you guys know the VBS and UMYF, all that. We just kind of kept going. Here's one of the things that I need to work on, though, because I have it a little bit later on, but this is a good time to say it. I've done so much, but I never did get involved with the UMW here. I don't exactly know why that was. I think God just wanted me focused on kids, and I was happy with that. So, I'd help out some with the oyster dinner, but I was never, and I wasn't official. But I was, I'll get to it later about what I have to work on. Okay. So then, talking about God's perfect timing again, I remember... When you're a new mom, you don't always get around to doing the things that you should do, like buying. I had looked, but I couldn't find my dad a Father's Day card that I liked. It just wasn't saying the right thing. And so one night I remember getting up in the middle of the night and going down to the dining room, taking a piece of paper and writing out a poem. I didn't bother looking for the poem. I'm sure I have it in the house somewhere since my parents have passed, but a poem about how good my dad was. And while I am doing that, all of a sudden I hear, psht, and look over, and the extension cord from the socket to wherever it was going had blown out and had gone past the little table that had our magazines on the bottom shelf and had set them on fire. And I was like, oh. I went over, picked them up, walked outside, threw them on the stoop, stomped on them, and fire out. But again, God had to have prompted me to get up and write this note about my dad so I could be there. I mean, who knows? The smoke alarm could have gone off and we could have heard it and taken care of everything. But it's just like, let's avoid that whole messy situation and just nip it in the bud. So again, God just bringing forth his timing. And the other big timing one was when Victoria was maybe 1.5. I felt like I was a stay-at-home mom. I felt like she needed to have more interaction, kind of social stuff with other kids. And so I made up a little flyer and was just walking in our neighborhood and putting the flyers in mailboxes with my phone number saying, looking for a play group with the 1.5-year-old or whatever. And as I was doing this, I saw a man, and I think, did he have a kid with him at the time? I'm not sure that he had Hannah with him at the time, but it turned out to be Tom Geller. Gave him the flyer. He said, well, this will be perfect for my wife. She just lost her dad and is looking, something, and she has a daughter just about the same age as Victoria. And so, yes, Jane and I, and all of you, I'm sorry you never got to meet my friend Jane Geller. She was great. She was a member at POHIC, but she'd always come and help us with our VBS. She and I were lifelong friends. Victoria and Hannah were like sisters. They called each other Sissy. And then Jane and I started calling each other Sissy, and we did stuff with the school for the PTA and just with each other. Got involved with a women's Friday Bible study that I am still involved in because of Jane. And it's just like, thank you, God, for letting me walk at that time to meet Tom, so that this could, and again, sticking the flyer in the mailbox still may have gotten the same result, but just to do it in person like that just made me see God's always working, always, always, always. And then God's grace is another example of God's grace. Was around when Victoria was about 3. I wanted her to have more, formal type stuff. And so and I can't even remember who introduced me to Lisa, but the Christian woman who ran a child care center up on just off of George Washington Memorial Parkway. And I got a part-time job there, was able to bring Victoria. She was able to interact and do all the, crafty things and the playground and all that kind of stuff. And so I stayed there for quite a while. And even after Victoria had started school here, I kept going up there. And then when and Jane and I had started being volunteers, PTA volunteers at Gunston, and then we ended up being the volunteer coordinators working together. So you've gotten calls from us, I know, and when there was stuff that needed to be done, Jane and I were the ones who had to find the people to fill those positions, and we were good at it, and we loved doing it with each other, and it was just great. And then when, oh yes, here I have it written down right there at Gunston, convenience again. And then when Victoria was in the 3rd grade, the daycare center that I had first started working at moved to a different location where the clientele was a little more rough, I would say. It wasn't as enjoyable for me to go. And it occurred to me that, hey, I've been volunteering here at Gunston. Everybody knows me. I could probably become a substitute teacher and then only have to be a mile from work. So that's what I did, became a substitute teacher, got called into Gunston as often as I possibly wanted. I mean, and then some. Yes, and then some. But again, that was such a blessing. I knew the people. I was able to ride my bike to work. Oh, that's what I forgot to say. In Leonardtown, when we first got married and came to Leonardtown, about a half mile from our apartment was Leonardtown Child Care Center, and they were looking for someone. And that's when I first started really working with kids. Head Start had been my volunteer thing in college, which was, that was for credit. That wasn't like, but then I found out, wow, maybe I do like children. And that might have been one of the reasons Lee and I didn't want kids, because I was getting my kid fix at work and then handing them back and not having to worry about anything. But anyway, so at Gunston, that was just, Cranford was my second family, and then Gunston became my third family. And it's just life, God, everything just so good, always looking out for us. And again, with God's detail in the minutia, 2 separate times when we had gone down to visit my parents with Victoria, we managed to lose our car keys on the playground. And look. And then finally, I was like, let's just stop. Let's just pray. Lord, we need our keys to get home. Please help us find them. And within, 5 minutes, there they are. In places we'd walked and just not seen. But anyway, we've gotten very much better at not losing our keys. Let's see. But again, just God being there. On my 50th birthday, this was not the way I wanted to spend my 50th birthday, but it actually made me not think about turning 50, because I was down at my parents' doing all kinds of running around. Mom's health was really bad, and I was trying to help Dad and Mom, and like 2 weeks later, Mom passed. And so and Dad was devastated. My brother and I were kind of at a loss, but we needed to be strong for Dad. Dad really, really had a hard time with it. In fact, my brother and I both figured that within months, Dad would be gone. But he hung on 4 more years. And most days going, why haven't you taken me yet so I can be with Joyce? And we, Ace would come up from North Carolina as much as he could to hang out with Dad, and I'd leave my family and go down there as much as I could to be with him, and of course take Victoria on weekends and stuff when we could. But Dad had a really hard time, and he got to the point where he needed to go into a nursing home. Both of us had offered, both my brother and myself had said, Dad, you can come live with us. But, once you've got your home and your doctors and your dentist and people that although Dad was not being very social at that time, he wasn't having people in and that much. But anyway, he ended up taking a couple of falls and not using his help I've fallen and I can't get up button. And thankfully, he apparently one time, I think this was what made us decide we needed to get him someplace, was that his neighbor John was always really good about picking up the mail for Dad and coming up the driveway and bringing it to him every day. And he came and Dad didn't answer the door, but John had a key, so he went in, and apparently Dad had fallen and for the last 18 hours had been crawling around the house trying to get to a chair or something where he could push himself up, but he just couldn't. And of course, Ace and I were very mad at Dad, but It's just, and I'm thinking, yeah, I could see me being that stubborn at some point in my life too. No one likes asking for help, even though you should. But anyway, so that was one of the things that had us. And Ace found a great place. The people were good to Dad. They took nice care of him. During the week, I would, Victoria'd be at school, Lee at work. I'd take the dog, and because they'd let the dog come into the nursing home too. And Dad wasn't the only one who loved midnight. Everybody was like, "Oh, look at the cute puppy," and everything. So that was a blessing to be able to take him. Here I forgot to when Mom passed, we had a very quiet memorial just at the house. Mom and Dad Mom didn't care. She was like, "I'm going to be dead. I don't care." and and Dad just wasn't up to doing anything big. So actually Lorenzo came down for it, and we had family and some local friends. But one of the things that I remember most about that was Dad had a little organ, and he played the organ while Victoria sang Amazing Grace. And that about did it for all of us. But it does remind us of God's amazing grace. So Dad ended up in a nursing home for probably the last couple of years of his life. But I think he was taken care of. I feel like he was. And I feel like Ace and I did a lot trying to get down there to see him and be with him. And it was so funny. Mom always wished Dad would read. But Dad liked TV, basically. But once he got into the nursing home, I guess he didn't, not being the social butterfly, he didn't want to be out in the main room where the TV is. There are other people, And so he started to read. I mean, he was just like, and I'd go to there used to be a used bookstore down here in Woodbridge, and I'd go and buy the large print books, and he would just eat them up. I'd go down there and have to take him another half dozen books every couple of weeks. So, but the irony, Mom really would have liked, I didn't tell him this, but, Mom really would have liked it if you'd been a reader when she was around. But anyway, and like we could tell that Dad was slipping, and the nursing home had told us the same thing, that things were kind of shutting down, didn't need to be in the hospital, just everything slowing down. And so I went down there and was with him, stayed with him the day before he died. He was unconscious, and, I was using little sponges to try to give him some moisture and all. And I just kept telling him, "Dad, it's okay to go home. Go on to Jesus. He's ready for you." And sometime in the wee hours of the next morning, he did. But I'd heard that before, that sometimes they just need to have the permission. Mm-hmm. And I really felt like he needed the permission. And so, let's see. And after that, I've always, as far as my faith goes, I've always prayed for loved ones. You always do that. You're praying for your family, your friends, the church, the community, the world, the big stuff. But then I can't remember where I heard it or read it, but that this woman had said that she always prayed for her children's future spouses, whoever they may be, that you pray that your child finds the right person God wants them to have, that this person be a godly person, and that sort of thing. So I think Victoria is probably a freshman or sophomore in college when I had heard that and thought, that's brilliant. And so I started doing that too. When I was praying for Victoria, I was also praying for whoever you're going to put in her life. And so I believe that God truly answered that prayer with Connell. Connell's a good guy, and I think that they will be a good match. I know they're a good match for each other. And so, yes, thank you, God, for answering that prayer. And now, of course, I just keep praying for both of them. Some other miracles of God's in my life that just, again, are like timing and everything. A couple of years ago before Jane had passed, when I was dropping her off after a Bible study, because her health had gone down, I was driving. I went around to let her out, tripped in her driveway. You guys know this. Smacked down face first into her drive. Split my lip open real bad, just gushing blood everywhere. Okay, no one was home to take care of Jane. I was going to hang out with her for a while after that, but her son lives right next door, and he came by and saw that he goes, well, I saw Sally there a minute ago, but now she's not with my mom. Where is she? And so he stayed the rest of the day. Lee came, picked me up, took me to the emergency room, and the doctor was going to stitch it up. And then he goes, no. He said, you should go to, he said, let me send you up to Inova, to Mount Vernon, Inova, because where it's split, you should really have a plastic surgeon do the work. And so I had a plastic surgeon stitch up my lip, which is just a miracle. I'm taking it as that. And then back Memorial Day, when I woke up with a terrible stiff neck on Sunday and just thought I'd slept wrong. But by Tuesday, I was going to my doctor because it just was not getting any better, taking all the stuff I needed, ibuprofen and anything I had at home. And doctor, I was kind of annoyed. It was Galini, not Chompy. He said, it sounds like a muscle strain, give you muscle relaxants and a prescription anti-inflammatory. It's like, all right. Took those, did not take any x-rays, took those, didn't help. Our handyman came the next day and said, oh, well, I just went to this chiropractor down in Woodbridge who did amazing stuff, lasers, and he said, you should try him. He goes, the first appointment's free. So, thank you, Laura.
5 minutes.
Yeah, I know, I'll be in there. And so I did that, and yes, first appointment was free. I must have felt like 50% better after the first appointment, and I've been going back since then. But again, the timing. Here's our handyman telling us about this guy right after I've gone, and it turns out that I do have 4 compressed discs in my neck, which is the whole reason for the pain. Wasn't just muscle strain. And then, of course, Christ's comfort when Jane died, and just remembering her favorite verse, to be still and know that I am God. And that gave me so much comfort, and because I knew that she was with him now, and that all I needed to do was be still and know as well. And now, as far as those things that I need to work on, here we go. I have faith, and I've done works. I feel like I'm doing that. But I sometimes feel like maybe I'm a banging gong, because it all is supposed to be done with love. And sometimes you're up here gritting your teeth going, I'm still here working on this. So, so I just have to let God keep leading me where he wants me to go and just see what's going to happen next.